This week on Around the Coin, Mike Townsend discusses his journey beginning as an engineer in Singapore, then moving to LA to design military UAVs. He tells us how he transitioned into payments by starting a point-of-sale company, Zing Checkout, and mobile payments company, Flowtab. Around the Coin.
Today's an exciting day. We have the three of us on, Brian Faisal and myself, Mike Townsend, and we're going to be digging into the real early day, how to get into mobile payments, payments in general. We'll be talking a bit about my story, and we'll see where it goes from there. So with that, how's everyone doing today?
Wonderful.
Doing great.
Great. So how do you guys want to start it off?
How did you...
So we want to start with you.
With me?
Yes.
All right. Where to begin? I guess everyone's sort of atypical, right? But I got into the payment industry through a friend of mine, Nate Stewart, who had been consulting with a clothing company called Red Chapter. But even bringing it earlier to that, if I was listening to this show and I'm considering how to get into the payment industry, I'm thinking what would be the most valuable lessons or the most interesting things that I'd want to know. And, coming from building two startups in the payment industry, going to the industry conferences, meeting all these executives, and having one that's now successfully running in Austin, I'm sitting back and thinking what I know is actually valuable. And when I graduated UConn, I went for mechanical engineering, and I graduated and I had an opportunity to move to Singapore. So I took the opportunity. This would have been February 2010. Moved to Singapore, lived and worked in the Brookstone, which is a beautiful eight-story office building, and on the top of it is a almost infinity pool, a workout gym, a tennis court. On the top of this building, it was an amazing place. And Brookstone is owned by a company called OSIM, and OSIM was started by this guy Ron Sim. Ron's an amazing guy, and he had this vision to just build beautiful, elegant products. I mean, in some sense, he had the sort of Steve Jobs vision of Asia. And with Brookstone, I'm not quite sure how their business is doing now, but the place is just an amazing community and culture. So I worked there for about 6 months, and we worked on a lot of their research and design projects. Most of them never got released into the world. There was some neat massaging. They had color massages, massaging your eyes, and this hand vibrator that would just, it would vibrate and massage your hand. And I worked on the next generation massage chairs, which is about as far away from payments as you can ever get. But what I learned is that across Asia, how distribution channels work, how sourcing and manufacturing works, how the research and design projects actually go to being funded and pitched to the CEO of the company and, move on to become consumer brand name products that we all have in our homes.
I have a question, Mike.
Sure.
I was always under the impression, I'm a Brookstone customer, I was always under the impression that Brookstone didn't originate their products. So you're saying that some portion thereof was actually designed internally? That's fascinating.
Yeah, they do. They have a design team of about 25, and then they also have a lot of other products that they bring in. They manufacture a lot in Japan and Taiwan. I think a majority are brought in, but they do have a lot of their own internal R&D. And when I was there, the reason I was hired was to, bring in this American guy to sort of bring in a different cultural input to sort of expand their internal research and design team.
So it was a fascinating job when you got there? I mean, you were really...
It really was. It opened up my eyes to the world of Asia. I mean, being in Singapore, you're living in a hub where you can travel to 10 different countries, within a 2-hour flight for less than $150. And that's just an amazing opportunity to get around. So, going to Indonesia, going to Australia, Taiwan, and Malaysia, all these places they give you an input as to the way people live. And I think, that's why I try to dig into Faisal, because I know what he knows is so much different than what every other person listening to the show living in the United States, maybe California, would know. And that's just the way people live, how they think about small things. And I think people think about, money, and in Singapore, there's this beautiful system. It's more technologically advanced than anything I've seen in the States, where they have this top-up card. And Singapore was constructed in a way that they had the opportunity to essentially develop the whole city on a blueprint, right? Because it was so quickly drawn up and created that they have these rails, north, south, east, west, diagonals, and then they have the circular going around the city. All the buses, metros, and taxis are all connected, and you can all pay in this top-up card. And the concept of using a top-up card was just so inspiring to me to see that the efficiency and fluidity of a payment card sort of just gave everyone the freedom and sort of the willingness and desire to just travel across the country, the city effectively. But I thought that was just such an inspiring idea.
Break that down for people who've never been in Singapore. How does a card work? How do you get it, and how is it used?
Sure. So when you first get there, you've got to get it just by walking in any 7-Eleven. 7-Elevens are everywhere. And you pay for a $20 or $30 card. And everywhere you go, they have this same, and this is what's key, is they have the exact same payment receptacle for the card. So you just swipe the card in front of it, you walk on to the metro, and you could travel around anywhere you want, swipe it when you leave. It's similar to the BART system in San Francisco, and but they also use it across buses. So the same system works. You walk in a bus, or you walk in a cab, and you could just swipe it in the receptacle of the cab. And I think that's where I've never seen the consistency across any of their infrastructure like the way Singapore had it.
What's the technology behind it? Is it mag strip or NFC or chip card?
It's got to be NFC. I would believe, at least, yeah.
Because you're tapping the card primarily in front of something.
Yeah. Exactly. I imagine it's a passive tag NFC chip.
And your experience is people love it in Singapore? I mean,
they love it, and I think, like anything, you don't realize how much you love it until you have it taken away. If we go to Vegas together, Vegas, I believe, still doesn't have Uber or Lyft, at least a few months ago. And, when you go there and you're in the hotel and you try to order a cab and they're saying they'll be there in 20 minutes maybe, and you're trying to describe how to get there, and, you're getting calls and trying to coordinate, like that's really annoying. And I think when you leave Singapore and you go to, Malaysia, which is right across the bridge, Kuala Lumpur is just, it doesn't have the same system. So you start to feel the inefficiencies of a rigid, inconsistent payment infrastructure. And I think that was sort of my first inspiration to saying, wow, it makes such a big difference, right? And I think, Martin Tamizi was particularly inspirational when he said, I want to build something that contributes the most value to society by building it on a layer that can do that, right? And for him, that's payments. And I think payments sort of is the only industry that gives that layer across every other industry to sort of boost or hinder it, right?
Absolutely.
Did you want to enter the payment systems because of that Metro tap that you saw and that you used?
No, not at all. Not at all. It wasn't.
So what happened in Singapore after that?
So after Singapore, it was a contract. So after 6 months, I took a position at an aerospace defense company. It was about 300-person software company and hardware company, and they developed radar systems for the military's UAVs, the Predator and drone. The Global Hawk for Northrop Grumman. And this was in Los Angeles. This is how I actually moved to California. And that was such an amazing opportunity. Worked there for 2 years. But I got stuck in this sort of corporate, I think what a lot of people feel, and this is what I think I wish I was able to hear, they're stuck in this sort of corporate mold. And if you're in there for over 5 years, I think it's really, really hard to escape. And it's hard to escape because of the mental patterns that you develop over these 5 years. We can get into that, but that's what I did after Singapore. And I worked on the hardware and systems engineering teams. And we were building a project called BAMS, which is Broad Area Maritime Surveillance project, and it's about the size of a microwave, and we had about 100 people working on it, and this microwave-sized device would go in the front of a UAV, about 60-foot. It's a large UAV, and these things would fly around in the U.S. military. And whenever a missile or something was shot at it, it would take over the control system and automatically avoid the missile coming towards the vehicle. So that's what we successfully developed. But like anything in the defense industry, there's large ups and downs. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of things that made it particularly unappealing. So I, sort of had this desire to search out for something new. And payments really wasn't even a thought in my mind until I went to the Co-Loft, which is this co-working space in Santa Monica, California. It's an amazing place. I think that there's sort of this large macro trend towards building these co-working spaces, but this was the first of its kind that I have ever seen. You walk in and it's maybe 5,000 square feet with maybe 60 or so, 30 or so people working during the day, and they're all working on their independent projects. Now it's very typical, but 5 years ago, this was still a new concept. To where people are, 2-3 people deep, and they're just, ingrained in their little projects. And now I think there's well over 10 successful companies that have come out of Co-Loft in the last couple of years. And, it's just such an inspiring place to be. I met, Kyle, my business partner now, and Nate, my business partner back then, and a majority of my friends through this one co-working space.
Now, would you call that an incubator type of environment? Was that the relationship with the provider there?
It's much different. It's not an incubator in that they have no vested interest in your company. They don't take equity. It's literally just rent. But what they do that's amazing is they focus the attention of the people around tech and around startups and around everything that would be valuable to you if you're trying to do exactly what I was doing, trying to leave your job, trying to get into startups and, develop skills and a network and an idea and traction around that. So from that perspective, it's just exactly what people needed at that point. And I think as soon as a city has this sort of pivotal location that people know to sort of circle around, it's just a snowball effect. Los Angeles now I think is maybe second, maybe right behind the Bay Area with New York, right up there. I think Los Angeles and New York are pretty close in terms of the technology scene.
At one time, Pasadena was number one. Bill
Gross and Idealab.
Idealab actually started some of these co-working spaces and incubators, and I had a little involvement with some of the companies at that era, and it was a beautiful time for Pasadena. I mean, you had Jet Propulsion Laboratory, you had a whole lot of people from Caltech, and I'm surprised that there is not more of a Stanford-like culture in Pasadena again. There's some beginnings of that, but not close to the Bay Area.
The thing with Pasadena, those are extremely smart guys. I've been there a number of times, but the physical distance is just it really weighs heavily. If you're on the west side, you just can't do it. It's an hour and a half in heavy traffic, maybe 2 hours during rush hour. So it just becomes not a feasible option. You got to live there, and that's really the only thing there. So it's sort of isolating. And if there ever was sort of a developed ecosystem beyond Idealab, I think it'd be compelling. But still, LAX, the airport is an hour and a half away, and that's tough. And Santa Monica now is really a benchmark. You just have some amazing companies here. Well,
I think the entertainment industry actually produced that ecosystem with high-end graphics and things like that, and of course the defense sector is still seeding that, just like yourself. I mean, I've probably hundreds of people I know that have actually walked the same path and then wind up going into different startups, payments, all sorts of things. So.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Within the payments, ecosystem, would you say that the Bay Area is the mecca of payments, or is it in the U.S.? Would it be some other city?
I do. So here's what I believe about, and I've lived in Austin, I've lived in Santa Monica, and I lived in San Francisco, each for about a year, Los Angeles and Santa Monica a little more. And what I've noticed about the three cities and sort of the different tiers of technology in those cities that if technology is your core competence and your biggest advantage, the Bay Area is by far the best place to be. If you're going to outperform someone on technology, that's where you need to be. If you're building something new and that just hasn't been introduced to the world from a conceptual standpoint, or you're building a marketplace, or for some other reason you have an advantage to be in an area that has a demographic that's stronger than San Francisco, then it's an advantage to be in that city. But San Francisco, particularly the Bay Area, just has the best engineers. I mean, hands down, bar none. They're just the smartest people in the world. So if you're going to build technology as your core competence, right, you're going to outperform something that already exists on some new facet or some new idea, that's the place you need to be.
And you can only hire to a great magnitude in an area where there's available workers, and for better or for worse, it's in the Bay Area.
But in the area,
but I was asking more of let's say the overall picture, if you will. I mean, is the Bay Area the place where all the payments people are, or all the payment companies are? Because to me, it would seem like Chicago or New York or Atlanta would be the.
It is diversified. Braintree's in Chicago. It doesn't seem to be centralized around any particular. At least
it's important how far back you want to go, too. I mean, Omaha, Nebraska has, because of First Data presence there, has a tremendous number of old school payment individuals. Texas, Dallas, Atlanta, some parts of the Midwest, Chicago, certainly New York.
And that's probably due to
Long Island.
the evolution of the payment industry, right? I mean, it's not a perfectly linear growth. It's sort of innovations at different points led to companies that happen to develop. If Braintree, Venmo were both in San Francisco, then you could argue that that would be a much larger case for that's the capital of the industry. But
if you look
at Douala. Douala comes from.
I don't know what that's.
Well, actually, it was convenience of having a bank that would work with them, and it really kind of played into the small. Country area that they grew up in. And then, they had a, relationship with the bank through a family member, which started that. Yeah. But, Southern California has been ground zero for a lot of payment merchant processing innovation for past 35 years. There's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of the basic companies started out here. A lot of the sales companies are still out here. Mm-hmm. A lot of the growth is still here. If you break down a map and you look at where the origination of where most of these merchant contracts are coming from, they're coming from a 50-mile radius in Southern California, about 85% of the sales in the United States. Mm-hmm. And that's not changing. All the squares of the world is not changing that pattern. It's growing.
Because if you look for the industry pundits, they're predominantly, centered around the Atlanta area, the New York, a bit in Chicago, and surprisingly for me, I found out Austin, Texas, and DC.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, I almost break it down and say there's no capital of the payment industry, but if you're looking at particular verticals, Brian makes a great point. There's so many independent sales organizations, merchant processors in Southern California, for whatever reason. I don't know if that's the culture or the water, whatever it is.
Well, it really started with one of the most successful companies located out here in the late 1970s, early 1980s.
There's also just a lot of merchants here. I mean, there's just such a huge, there's so many stores.
It's funny, you see all the technology innovation, of course, coming from the Bay Area, but you see a lot of the extrapolation of it coming through the sales channels still that are coming through Southern California. And I see it all the time. I see companies that start up in the Bay Area and they try their own way at it, and then they wind up talking to people who are within these sales channels.
So anyways, Mike, from Coloft, what happened?
So Coloft, I was and this is what I think is really important. Coloft, I was there nights a weekend. So right after work, I would leave at about 4. I'd get there around 7 a.m., leave at 4. And I would drive straight to the Coloft every day, 7 days a week. And I would get there and there's sort of this second shift. At around 6 p.m., there's this shift from the guys working during the day to the guys working at night. And I sort of see this across all co-working spaces. It's almost a macroeconomic effect where you have guys working full-time jobs, going to try and meet and get work done on their side projects. And this is what I lived. I lived this for about 6 months and met some amazing people, went to all the events, and you sort of hit this tipping point in your mind where you realize that you can't both be in the pool and be out of the pool. And I would go and I met Kyle Hill is now my business partner. And Nate Stewart at the time was introduced to me from the founder of the Co-Loft, Avesta. And he made the introduction saying, Nate's got this idea. He's an incredibly smart developer, and he's got this good connection and sort of roots to build something really interesting. And that really interesting project and company now is called Zing Checkout. And I met Nate, and he just had this vision for what he wanted to build. And sort of when you meet someone that you get a sense of people, how committed they are to the work that they're doing. And Nate's one of those people that you instantly can understand that there's nothing more important in the world than building this company. Like nothing. And nothing will stop him. And when I sort of felt that just life and that vigor, it was I couldn't put it down. And I think some people are going to respond differently to that. But I think the key is exposing yourself to people who feel like that. Because I think the ultimate tragedy, right? And I think this is what we're really talking about when we're talking about different countries and their technology scene and their opportunity for innovation, is the ability to talk to people about this through an introduction that's valuable enough to have the conversation. So, Nate had built Zing for about 6 months to a year, just in his apartment, just, toying around with the idea. He'd been a consultant for Red Chapter Clothing, which is an extremely fast growing clothing company based in Southern California. Now they're, tens of stores, and they're doing fantastic. But at the time, they were started by the two brothers, where they would consult with Nate to build the website, and they would express to Nate, Nate, our biggest problem is that when we go to events, we don't have the software to communicate to our store in real time what our inventory is, right? We don't have the payment and reporting tools to track our sales throughout the day at multiple locations. And if you wanted to do that, you'd have to export a CSV, and you'd have to use QuickBooks, and it was really a hassle. So the idea of real-time web-based point of sale was really an interesting opportunity. And I think Nate was one of the first people in the world to see that this was going to happen, and also have the skills to say, I can make this happen. And when that light switch went on in his head and he said, I'm going to bring this to life, I was like, this is, what better opportunity in life could you have to work with someone like this?
What year was that?
This was in 2011. Yeah, 2011. So, we just brainstormed about how this is going to work. None of us, neither Nate or I had been in a startup before, understood, the process of, equity. So you're sort of going through this initial stage of, developing the legal structure, and you're trying to figure out how it works at the same time as actually doing it. So I think there's no better way to learn something than by being forced to do it that same day. So we hired a lawyer, Dan Wu, an amazing guy, and he helped us walk through the process of creating the company, structuring the cap table, in preparation for, multiple rounds of funding. And, we were on our way. And at the time, it was really a night project for me, but a full-time project for Nate, in that he was consulting with Red Chapter Clothing. And, an important point to note, I think, is that if you go from consulting to building your own product, it's important early on to develop the legal agreement to split those two, right? If you're consulting with, a hospital or something, and they have this project, or they express this pain, and you start to build on it and you tinker with it as a developer, you need to cut the tie and say, everything I build on this new idea is completely mine. And I think that was one of the things that Nate could have gone back and done better, was saying, if I work on this nights and I understand your problems and I build something, I'm going to come to you and sell it to you rather than have you own it. So now Red Chapter is a partial owner in Zing, and a valuable one at that. But they really contributed the early ideas. But I think if we really separated the two legally, it would have been a more clean process.
So at that time, there was no other web-based point of sale solution out there?
That time, if you were to punch into Google web-based point of sale in 2011, you would see overwhelmingly IMongo. And IMongo was this, I believe it was developed in the Philippines. So we really there wasn't too much behind the company, but boy, they were the only ones out there. The only ones, that we could find. And they were just terrible. I mean, I hate to ever insult a company, but the feature set was unusable, which I believe is a fairly objective way to assess it. And it was inspiration, right? Because you'd see all of these merchants say, I need ways to maintain my inventory and sales reporting for multiple stores. But IMongo is the best tool. And, I think it was only available on Windows, and you had to bring your computer there, and you had to have a separate payment terminal, a 500 connected to it, and you're swiping cards, and it would crash all the time. So there was just knowing how HTML5 worked, and sort of the technology in place to build something better. That was really the gateway. But that was the only thing that was out there at the time.
How did you deal with the debate, even in 2011, native app versus web-based app, and all of the politics around that? Still raging today.
Still raging today. I think you just have to look at what your customers are more willing to use, as opposed to what you prefer to build. We had a strength in HTML5 as opposed to iOS, and Android really wasn't a market dominating platform at the time. But also that, look at what your customers are going to use, right? They go to trade shows, they have their computer in their store. They Lightspeed is a fantastic and beautiful company, and they build native iOS, but originally they built HTML5 and they built web-based tech because that's the easiest, is the quickest to iterate on dev cycles, and it's the easiest to use across multiple platforms, right? We would have people on Android.
Did you meet with resistance from VCs and Angel and?
Not as much, because you always know that it's coming, right? You always have a better experience on an iPad. Square is, I don't believe they even have, I could be wrong, but an HTML5 version of it.
No, they don't.
They're really an iOS dev shop. So
yeah.
So that's their core competency, but I don't think that is what our customers really want. If you're going to buy the whole system up front, you pay for the whole Square and you pay for the register. But remember, that's a few years later. In the early stages, people just had their little notebooks, and they weren't using iPads at the time. They didn't have any of the MacBooks lying around. They were just practical, pragmatic
Dell
computers. Yep. Exactly.
So, what did you think of QuickBooks POS at that moment? Because, theoretically, they should have been in a position to dominate this.
Yeah, QuickBooks and Intuit, it's such an interesting company because they're everywhere. And they were the, biggest request is, can you integrate to QuickBooks all the time?
Exactly.
And I think it's important, taking a step back, another lesson is in point of sale in particular, you always get verticalized. And what I mean is you develop a specific feature set that becomes valuable for your vertical, your target customer. And it's difficult to transition that easily into others. So Square, it was developed around coffee shops. Those guys would go into coffee shops and they would ask coffee shop owners how it works, and small restaurant owners. So you can start to see the most valuable and biggest segment of their customers is coffee shops and small restaurants. For us, it was apparel. We had an apparel company as our consultant where we learned all the ideas. But then from that point, once we built their answer, we sort of hit base camp. Then it's a matter of, okay, how do you integrate? How do you build, 35 different vertical markets into this? Because each have different feature sets and requirements. And when it comes to point of sale in particular, features are everything. I mean, you can have a beautiful design, but the beautiful design of the user is not usually the one who's deciding which point of sale to use. It's usually the owner or the manager saying, we're going to use this based on features and cost, and if there's any risk to the decision. But it really comes down to features. And for us, it was apparel first, and now it's verticalizing into other industries. And what's interesting is you see other, our competition in some sense was developed into bike. One was developed into bike shops. So they owned a vast majority of those. And it's interesting how it forms the point of sale industry.
what was your impression at that point? Why a POS system with the most popular accounting software on the planet didn't take hold? I mean, by anybody's estimate, QuickBooks POS is an utter failure.
It is, and I think QuickBooks had an amazing distribution strategy, right? They would work with all the accountants, and once they got into the society and the community of the accountants, and they built something that was much easier for them. So they all had an incentive to use it. And once they did, then you had small businesses adopt it because it was the best product on the market, and they had just amazing adoption. But QuickBooks Point of Sale, I think, was lacking in the usability. It was a pretty janky software. I don't know, I don't know anything about the development of the product.
It was acquired and then hobbled together. It was never
really
the same development team.
It really was, and I think it would crash often. People just had a bad connotation with it. It didn't get great reviews. It sort of never hit broad market adoption. So we never really saw them as a big competitor. We almost split it between incumbents. Micros is one of the largest, and then you have the new guys, and they were more in the incumbents category, and they didn't do a great job.
Now, did you see the iOS coming as what Square wound up doing? Sort of, unfortunately, in my view, locked themselves into the closet of an iPad, essentially limiting the market reach and penetration. Did you see that coming down the road potentially for this product, that you would move to an iPad, or were you always going to be agnostic to the platform?
Yeah, I think the vision early on really is to be agnostic. And the vision behind agnostic is to work for everyone, right? I think by building an iPad system, you're convincing people to move to Apple products. And that can be better for some people, but it's not better for everyone. Not everyone needs a beautiful design. We would have, gun shops in Texas use us where they don't care at all about design, is sort of, clash to say that's not their even top 5 decisions. Stability, speed, uptime, feature
cost.
set. Yeah, cost. These are the things that matter to people. So building iOS is not, and it was not the number one consideration. If people had an interest, iPad certainly picked up and it became huge. But even then, there's limitations in the iPad. Printing was difficult. If you have multiple USB terminals, you're going to have a credit card swiper, a barcode scanner. If you're going to import inventory, how are you going to manage those separate ports? There's technical limitations to the iPad. The iPad was not developed to be a point of sale system, right? It's developed to be a platform for a lot of different industries, but it doesn't particularly fit well for point of sale across the board, right? It fits for coffee shops beautifully, but they don't really they don't onboard inventory the way an apparel store would or a grocery store would, right? They don't communicate with portable devices that scan all the barcodes across the store. So there's limitations technically.
Well, the interesting thing that I find is a lot of the iOS-based systems like Square don't maintain an active inventory. And it's always shocking to me when I'm talking to people who are otherwise experts in the industry, and they speak about these products, and I say, have you ever looked at the inventory function for the Square Register? And I said, well, of course, you can have an inventory. I go, no, you can have a list of SKUs, but it doesn't show active inventory. And there's no way to do that at this current point. And it always was shocking to me when I sat down with insiders unofficially, mostly. And this is back in 2010. I would start talking about, why is there not an inventory system here? What's the thinking behind that? And still here we are in 2014, no inventory system. So that dramatically restricts the market. And here you guys were based primarily centered around the inventory system. What's your feeling on that? I mean, isn't that an important thing?
Inventory is huge, and you have to think from the store owner, right? We always say, what's it like for the store owner, right? If they get shipments, if they get boxes of clothing, or if they get boxes of coffee, or if they're a grocery store and they get pallets of new items shipped to them, right? The first thing they've got to do after they sign off on the delivery is scan the items into inventory, sure. Right? And if you're a coffee shop, this is not a big deal, right? Because you get maybe 7 different bags of beans, right? If you're a small business where you can just say you're a small breakfast spot. You just see the inventory. There's no need to keep a digital version of it for some, right?
Yeah, but
for
you
us,
lose the ability to build real. A lot of people feel that Square's ultimate goal was to create big data, right? And the thing that makes big data work is to look at exactly how much is going in and exactly how much is going out. And it's very hard to get that when you're just using a list of SKUs that are on file. How many muffins did I make? I made 25, okay? And you are looking at your terminal, I now have 24, now I have 23. This is an important thing for a small business because tracking all the inventory, a bakery, which is a big Square location, how much coffee is left.
Right.
They produce.
Here's the difference, though. You are correct. However, small business owners, oftentimes, from my perspective, have a lot of other things that they perceive to be more valuable going on.
Sure.
So inventory takes work, and the job of the technologist and the software provider is to make the onboarding and inventory management as easy as possible. Right? You want to have them scan it. Ideally, they don't do any work, but you have to somehow maintain that inventory, and it's extremely valuable, right? Like Milo, their idea was to have real-time inventory of all the stores around you, so that when you have a need for, a wrench, you can know exactly where to go and who has the wrench, and you can compare prices. But this never really developed into reality. And the reason for it is that the fragmentation across point of sale systems and the ability to keep real-time inventory is very, very difficult, because everyone's going to use, Aloha, Dinnerware, Micros, and they're all going to use different systems that don't talk to each other. They're very difficult to integrate with. I'm actually good friends with one of the engineers that tabbed out, which we can get to later. But they've integrated to more point of sale systems than any other company. And, I talked to them about it. It's very difficult. There's all different technology stacks, and there's holes in the system. So inventory is huge, and it's managed well, but not across multiple platforms or software.
So what did you see as your biggest barrier? You're in the middle of this, right? You're gung-ho and you're out there getting this product developed. What starts happening? You and your founder are there and you're building it up. What do you see as your first stumbling blocks, challenges, mountains to climb?
Totally. And I I would take it back to a lesson. If I were to start from day one again, I think it's just really, really understanding and valuing your customers, because they are, even when there are 5 of them, they're the most valuable people in the world. And I think there was always this idea and like essential thirst for building something scalable and huge, but you can't go from 0 to 60 without going 30 miles an hour. So early on, it was the early customer feedback. They would say things to us like, "Hey, we need we need multiple store support, or we need multiple tax. There's taxes in different states, cross sales tax," or they would have specific feature requests that were difficult to build instantly. They took work like anything else. But I think it's how the most challenging thing was how you answer customers when you don't have an answer yet, right? It's how you keep them happy and on your system. And that's sort of an art. It's sort of a subjective human art to say, sorry, we don't have the feature you need, but don't leave us yet. Or, sign up with us now because we have these other things available to you. And in the next, month, we're going to have this feature that you need. Or convincing them it's not essential today, right? Because as a store owner, there's 100 things you need, but you need to prioritize and say, okay, this is the best and this will do the job.
How did you mechanize it? How did you mechanize the growth of the feature set? And was there editing? Was there voting? How did this go about?
Yeah, we actually got into a Excel sheet, and we created a XY axis of difficulty versus desire, and we threw on every feature we had, and we used Trello as a management tool. Trello is amazing, and
beautiful.
Every time we would get a request for something, we would throw it in Trello, and once a week, at the end of the week, we would sit down and we would say, okay, this is the number of times this feature was requested. This is the number of perceived requests in the future, i.e. how big is this going to be? How valuable is this going to be if we build it? And then how difficult is it to build, right? So how long does it take? And if you create this access and you say, these are the most these are the most difficult things that take the longest, that have the least effect, don't worry about those. But the ones that have the biggest effect, that takes the least amount of time, build those out, because that leads to quick results.
Wonderful.
That converts the customer. And I think that's the way you have to do it. Otherwise, especially in a software platform that's as complex as point of sale, where there's so many different types of customers, there's so many different features, you have to categorize a very organized way to attack that.
Now, Mike, the thing that I've been arguing very vigorously for most tech companies that would listen to me, and I am fortunate enough, there's a lot that are listening to me right now, is just this last week, I've had 10 founders, and, some of them have been listening to our podcast here, talk about this with me. And my point is this: how can you build a feature set if you don't have a sales channel, right? So I believe the paralysis that most technology companies have is that they build it, they feel very firmly about the features that they're building. There's debate internally. Technologists will debate it. And then they feel very positive about the editing that they're doing. There's some that are very proud of the fact that we edit 99% of all the features out of the product. And that sounds great. It makes good headlines on Fast Company. But when it comes time to actually deal with real merchants, a true sales channel, not the internet, not a Google click here, sign up 5 minutes later, you're processing. Did you feel that sales channel feedback really assisted you, since essentially you were one of the salespeople there, right?
Yeah, hugely. I think especially in the beginning, people underestimate the value of sales. And sales almost carries this negative connotation for some reason. I think that there's a lot of, there can be dirty business in sales between you lying to people, or, I think particularly the merchant processing business has developed this sort of negative reputation. But essentially you're a vendor, right? You're providing something that people need, but the difficulty is, how do you distinguish upon which of these proposed vendors are the best fit, right? And that is where I think it's the most difficult assessment for a merchant. And I think the internet helps a lot in that, right? There's reviews, there's ways to quantify which vendors offer things that you need. There's stability, uptime. You could research a ton, and the internet is the tool for that. But at the end of the day, even Yelp, they have, hundreds of salespeople, and they're going to call merchants individually, right? I'm not sure if Yelp from day one imagined they would, but there's no other way they would be successful without those salespeople. And if you look at OpenTable as well, the list goes on. And if you look at any small business point of sale system, or any point of sale system in general that's been developed, you'll notice that they all have the same sales channel. They'll have 600 resellers. The reseller market is huge in point of sale. And I think how you fit into the reseller channel is a huge opportunity, and not a lot of companies figure that out. But direct salespeople as well, you need them to sort of get that feedback, and you need people who are going to give you the feedback from the customer that helps you develop the product, right? That's how you sort of get that cycle going. I think
it's early days, right? You're out there, you're actually talking to merchants because you're one of the founders and you're trying to get them to sign up. How did that, that's early in the afternoon, you come back in the office late at night. How did that inform the development? How did it feel? And did you feel conflict? Because from a technologist standpoint, you wanted this to happen. And from a reality, practical and pragmatic standpoint, Y happened instead of X.
Yeah, totally. I think it would be a beautiful world if we could build something and people would find us through SEO, and they would sign up online and we would never talk to them, and they would, import their inventory automatically. But the reality is that this doesn't happen, right? And this rarely happens. As much as we see, the adoption of, say, something like Dropbox, so there's many platforms where people will sign up and you don't need to talk to anyone. Point of sale is not one of those industries. Point of sale, you actually need to speak with someone most of the time, just to get the reassurance that this is, especially in the early days, if you have a platform that's, vetted and easy enough, that's the end goal. But I think a lot of companies don't seem to cross that chasm of talking to everyone. Even Stripe, Patrick talks about in the early days, we talk to every customer, we help them go through the sign up process. And if you don't do that, if you don't have that hunger and sort of desire to do sales and onboarding, you can't get to that second stage of being, an easy flowing, use the advantage of software, right? So, an interesting point, we had an advisor. One of the things we realized was, as much as we would love to just onboard customers and have them sign up on the site and import inventory and their credit card and have it all be gravy, what we realized is that the world doesn't operate that way today. So we actually took a move, and I think, if coming from an early stage startup, this is one of the best things that we ever did, was we found an industry expert. And in our case, Chester Ritchie was it. Chester had been an early engineer at Apple. He left to work for a point of sale company, Cam Commerce, and brought them now to over a $200 million valuation, and just an amazingly smart guy. Now he works at WorldPay, and he's a senior vice president there, partnerships. But he really implanted the idea that you need to have sales. It wasn't even a question, right? And he explained how Commerce did it, and they had 600 salespeople across the country, and how they set up their sales structure, and how they incentivize salespeople, and what to look for. And not to say that we're going to get to that scale tomorrow, but it's just such an invaluable thing to have someone like that in your team. So I think seeking out people with industry expertise, especially in distribution across payment systems, is probably the smartest thing that you can do early on.
So where did it go? What was your journey from there to your next venture?
So we raised money with Zing Checkout. We signed up Tesla Motors in Menlo Park, which really helped us. Yeah, it really helped us sort of get visibility.
How did that happen? How did you sign Tesla? This is good.
So Tesla, we went to the launch conference in San Francisco, and Tesla happened to be right next to us. And Nate was there with his wife, and just got talking to the guys at Tesla, and the head of business development was there, and he said, we've had build a point of sale system on the whiteboard for the last 3 months, and it's never gotten done. And they didn't know how they were going to do it. And when I mean their inventory, I mean their actual clothing, the things that they sell in the store aside from the car. The car is completely, integrated to their whole flow system. But they had no way of really managing that, and it was kind of a pain. And if you're going to build a complete experience for the customer, you really want to have a beautiful way to manage that, even through the inventory in the store. So we followed up with them aggressively, and we met up with them in their Menlo Park office, and we saw what they were using, which is Excel and pen and paper, and then we showed them what we had, and we, hats off to Nate, just worked tirelessly to build a platform that would be best for them. We had this beautiful Tesla colored interface, and we have the ability for the customer to just sign right on there. Everything was there for them. And I think when you make something easiest for the customer to buy, that's when you become the best option, right? And we were just so easy for Tesla to say yes. We built everything for them. We were always on call. We treated Tesla like we should have treated every other customer, exactly. Frankly.
Yeah. Now, this customization, and this is another theme that I am very firmly about, is that to be successful, you have to be able to allow customization down to the nth degree. Because you're on such a portable platform, HTML5, the ability to Teslaize your POS system was inordinately magnitudes easier than if you were on another system. It's not recompiling, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So you felt that was critical, right? That was a critical thing that made them shift from maybe building in-house. In a sense, they really did build in-house because you were like a custom programming team for them.
Yeah, we were. I think, we had the Tesla logo on there, Tesla colors, everything was Tesla. So having that it made them feel like they were part of it. I always believe if you have this great idea and you work within a team of people, in order to get them to adopt the idea, you have to make them feel like they created it, right? And what we did successfully with Tesla is we made Tesla feel like they built the point of sale, right? They're still paying us, and it's still our platform and it's our product. But we work with them so intimately, and we would be so quick on the dev cycles. If you have something in the afternoon, we'll have it done by tomorrow morning, and like that made them feel like, wow, this is mine. I own this. And from a human emotional standpoint, that was so important. especially even when, presenting to large companies. I think if you can get them to believe that this is our product and this is our ownership, you're just the tool acting to create it, that's where you want to be. And that's what we did.
Well, I really think it's the future, too. It's one of the reasons why Starbucks, it was essentially an in-house and out-house sort of consulting environment. And then ultimately they took it in-house. But I think a lot of large and medium retailers are scoffing at the lack of flexibility of mobile payment systems, wallets, et cetera, in the market. And it's a big problem, and very few companies are really there to address it. You have different people who have different parts of the technology stack. You have the Stripes and the Balance of the world, but they're relying upon the developers to interface with the end recipient of the product. And I would say it's that last mile where I'm seeing a critical failure. And then the companies that have general products, all the way from PayPal, Square, all they want to do is create a general product. They don't even want to talk about segmentations of markets. And so you have this big chasm that nobody's filling. And frankly, I think it's one of the reasons why you acquired that company and why I think the future growth is in that direction is, have a toolbox of every tool imaginable and then customize it like a bespoke tailor would to the individual merchant, and to do it with such speed and grace that you would blow them away. And I think you can scale that easily.
Yeah, I agree. And I almost look at it from what's the most valuable lessons that I would want to hear at different stages, right? And if you're working at a full-time job right now and you're listening to this and you're saying, how do I get into the payment industry? Or maybe it's not even about the payment industry. There's just something about it that you like and you want to escape your job and work on a startup. I think putting yourself in a position around other people is the number one thing that's going to get you to mentally believe that, leaving is not a big deal, right? If you have a soft, cushy job, my brother works at Microsoft, and you kind of get in that mindset, it's difficult to leave. So if you're an early stage guy and you're thinking about how to get into it, constantly be thinking about your next project. And eventually the jumping in the pool will be easy. If you're working at a company now and you're saying, how do I grow it, right? I have a couple customers. How do I grow it? You're probably thinking too much in terms of SEO, online sign up, right? You need to go and talk to people. And I think those two lessons along the road were just so important. Go and talk to your customers, go and sit down with them and actually draw out the features that they want. And then now it's easy for you, right? If your customer tells you exactly what they want, your job is easy. All you have to distinguish upon is what they, maybe don't actually need, which is a much easier task than figuring the former out. But then I think, Brian, I transitioned to Flowtab.
Yeah. How did you get? So you're talking about transitioning from a military contractor job to a startup, and the startup's doing great, and you're kind of feeling good. What gave you the sense of security to leap into something else? I mean, that's also an important thing because we all grow.
Yeah, sure. And I think, with any founder change, there's always going to be a lot of emotions that carried around it.
Sure.
But Kyle, is one of my best friends. He also is a designer. He had his own design firm called Khaleesi down in Los Angeles. Extremely talented, extremely motivated guy. Just like Nate, carries that same diehard personality where you know he's going to succeed. So he started Flowtab with him, and I were brainstorming the idea, but it was really his baby. And he moved to San Francisco, raised a seed round of capital. We actually published this whole story on TechCrunch and on the website, to the likes of which have just gotten tremendous feedback from people all over the world saying that they've changed or modified their ideas. And, it's been such an amazing journey there. But, I joined Flowtab really because I felt the potential there across mobile ordering at a different stage of the payment system was so interesting, right? Because you have point of sale systems, and that's an inevitable shift. It's like steering the Titanic, right? It's going to happen. It's a much larger, bigger shift. But then you have mobile payments and mobile ordering. And I felt that just had the explosive opportunity to where, you could build something and sell it to someone and they could say yes, as opposed to you're working within the constraints of the merchant that if they don't need what you have, you can't sell them that. You can't really walk into a store and sell someone a point of sale system because they have a system that works. When they realize they have a problem, they're going to search out for an answer, right? So point of sale is not direct sales the way Flowtab was, because it's an ancillary layer product. And I think this is a big distinguishing quality that is important to understand.
Was that really in your thought process? Because I know a lot of people in POS that's not in their thought process. They just think that they're going to change and scrap existing, infrastructure. So you're thinking about how could I get involved in it as an ancillary way?
Let me tell you something, Brian.
Sure.
This is the non-beautiful part that I think a lot of founders don't like to talk about. We went down across the coast. We went down to Huntington Beach. We're in Santa Monica, so we went down Long Beach. We went down to Laguna Beach, and we would go to all these small merchants who we had developed a system that I knew was by far the best in the market. And we would walk in there and we would say, "Hey, can we speak to the manager?" And they say, "Okay, 1 minute." They go get the manager. "Hey, how can I help you?" And right away, they're kind of, hesitant. They're wondering who we are. And we say, we built this software platform that allows you to more efficiently take payments, manage inventory. And here's a piece of paper about it. And they look at us like we're from another planet. And we couldn't ever get success going door to door. And he's like, "No, we have a system that works." Right. And in their head, they're thinking, "I have 100 things to do today. How do I get out of this conversation as quick as possible?" So direct sales for us, we beat our head against the wall with it. It really never paid off. And it never paid off because people have a system that works. And you can't just force your way in there.
Mike, what if you were on TV on a talk show and, Larry King was interviewing you? Would you think you would still be able to get that manager to throw out his POS system? Or do you think that there's fundamentally another problem here?
Think of it like a spectrum, Brian. If you're on a 0 to 10 and you're on 0 is I don't care at all. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change my point of sale system. I've been doing it the same way for 30 years. Go somewhere else. Versus 10 is like, man, this system sucks. I have 10 employees. We're growing quickly. I got to find something new. It's just not on the top of my plate. If I'm on Larry King and I'm talking to the guy who's a 10, he's going to switch tomorrow, right? Because it's supposedly easiest and fastest. But the guys on the bottom, they don't have that desire, right?
They're immune to your message.
If you go in,
it's not broken.
If you go into a 1 and you say, "Hey, I'll give you $10,000 to switch," sure, he'll listen to you, right? But he's not desiring to switch. So I think Flowtab, what I've learned is that you can go in and anyone will listen to you, anyone will consider it, and they'll either say yes or no, right? No one's going to say, "Oh, I already have a mobile ordering system," "Oh, I already have a mobile payment system available for the bar."
Tell me about the early days. So here you're coming from that realm of rejection, which I think everybody needs to face. It's not a bad thing. I mean, face the things in the dark. But you moved into this realm of where there is possibility thinking. How much was that transitioning really motivating you? Was it getting you, back into the saddle, so to speak, and saying, "Wow, I want to talk to people about this. I'm energized"?
Yeah, it is. I think there's a difference. There's a different mental stimulation between building something that's just better than something that exists, right? Taking the feature set, making it more beautiful, making it, web-based, making it faster and easier. And then there's something different. Then there's that feeling of creating an experience that never existed in the world. And that was just awesome. That was just so alluring, to build. I go into a restaurant, we worked with at Flowtab, we worked with the largest hotel in California, the Hotel Marriott, with over 1,600 rooms. Yeah. And they have 3 bars. And, we just cold called them. I called up, Sylvia was the manager there, and said, "Hey, we have this mobile ordering system." She's, "Oh, really? That sounds neat. Come in." So we went in, it literally happened like that. And, that's after 25 rejection calls, but that one went well. And we went in and she said,
"Mike, if you gave up at 23 calls or 24 calls, it wouldn't have happened, right?"
Yeah.
And this is what I talk about all the time about reaching out. So you're in these early days, you got Marriott doing it, things are going good. What was the next milestone? You're really happy, you're moving along, but there's milestones appearing, in this journey. What was the next one?
Next one, I think, was understanding how you go from, 2 or 3 places to 2 or 300, right? Or even taking that next level. But I think one thing that we didn't do well was weighing the value of outside perception versus the value of the business. Mike Jones is a successful entrepreneur, and he was our advisor at Flowtab, and he introduced us to Dex One. Dex One's a 2,000 person publicly traded Salesforce company. They sold Yellow Pages ads, and we partnered with them. We developed a partnership in Denver where they had sales guys going out. They wanted to go to Orlando. They wanted to go to the Bay Area, and we were like, we solved this distribution problem. This is awesome. But what we didn't solve was the experience problem, right? We didn't figure out that when you walk into a bar, maybe the number one thing in your head is not how do I quickly order a drink. Maybe it's you're not in a rush. No one in a bar or in a restaurant necessarily is in a rush. That's why
Let's
they're
hope
there.
Not.
Yeah. So I think one thing we did incorrectly is partner with a big company too early. Dex One was huge, and they wanted to roll this out to their whole company. And Kyle's on stage in front of 2,000 people saying Flowtab is going to be, the savior for Dex One, and the whole company's cheering, and the CEO is, commending him. I mean, this is the scene we were in Las Vegas at their company conference, and it just escalated so quickly that it was hard to say, wow, let's take a step back and let's talk to the 20 or 50 people inside of a restaurant or bar using our system. And we just found that people don't necessarily always want to use mobile ordering. And the difficult part is every experience is different. Every bar is different. So you have to position the iPad in different places to get it to work. And every place is a unique installation. And that became just such a difficult, sort of insurmountable obstacle for us.
So this is interesting. Now we have the pyramid somewhat inverted. Here we have the potential of a huge sales force who has contacts into the market, but now you have a scalability potential problem of deploying these devices. Where are they going to go? How are we going to customize them? How did that impact you at that point?
Yeah. Well, I would say,
it's got to be scary, right? Because the dream really is to get it out there as much as you can. And then I hear in your voice and what you said is like, oh boy, maybe this isn't as big of a thing. Maybe we should go back and craft it better before we get all these 2,000 odd people selling it.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say, Brian, the balance of being an entrepreneur is weighing perception, but also weighing reality behind the scenes. Sure. There was 4 of us in the company at the time. We were based in San Francisco. San Francisco is an interesting place. And I definitely do want to impart this perception that after going out to, well over 100 local merchants in San Francisco, myself over, weeks, if not months, we learned that San Francisco is a completely unique place, and that the reverse perception of technology is actually the reality. That merchants in San Francisco, they sign up for all the apps out there. If you ever see 25 stickers on a window, they sign up out of fear. And let me tell you something, from selling in Denver to selling in San Francisco, the sales is so much different, and the reaction and actually use of it is different. A merchant will sign up for something in San Francisco because they're fearful that if they don't, their competitors will. So they kind of say yes to everything.
There's something else too. I got to tell you this story because I think you'll find it humorous.
Yeah.
There was when I was conducting one of the Square research studies for a client, and I did it myself. I did the field work myself empirically. I'm sitting here with a merchant, and I'm counting the labels on his window. There's 27 of them. And this particular merchant was in the Square wallet. That's how I identified him. And I noticed that he had all of the possible payment devices you could ever get for free. He had a Square dongle. He had PayPal had just come out. He had Bank of America had a thing. He had Verifone. He had them all lined up. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "They're all free, so why not?" And he goes, "Well, Square will send some people to me, I hope, and this and that." And I said, "So why do you do this?" And he goes, "Well, if I get just one customer coming in my business and it didn't cost me anything, sure. So I let these guys come in." He goes, "Every day somebody comes in with a new product, a new thing." And he goes, "Yeah, I'll do it." And he sells a cup of coffee and a Danish to somebody while they're trying to sell him. And literally, it's a really practical and pragmatic approach. You got something to sell me? Okay, get a coffee while you're talking to me. And and that's how he's loaded up. And frankly, I see that a lot. Not just in the Bay Area, but in a lot of different places.
Hugely.
So you're out there seeing this inversion of technology. So now you're out in the, let's say, even outside of Southern California. Did you go out into the hinterland of like Cleveland or something like that with Flowtab?
It was really Los Angeles, Denver and San Francisco.
Let's talk Denver. What was different about Denver?
Denver, we signed up the largest strip club in Denver. It's called Shotgun Willie's, and we didn't actually do it. It was one of the salespeople.
Sure, Mike.
Salespeople through Dex One. But I'll tell you this:
I'm doing research.
I hadn't been to Denver until they sold them, and when we heard that, we had to fly out, and we occasionally we'd go every 3 weeks, and we would train all their new bars, and we'd go and we went into Shotgun Willie's. And they're so large that it hit me right there that when I was standing inside this strip club, trying to train 3 of the waitresses on mobile payments, I'm thinking to myself,
there were distractions all around.
There was distractions.
I gotta restrain myself with the comedy here. But
the important part of it, though,
I think we have to edit this part out.
Yeah.
The important part is that every merchant is so different. Every customer is so different that their needs were so much. They were so different than a small bar, the Marriott, that the user experience became, so uncontrollable that I think that was the point in which I realized the only way we're going to make this work is to scale it down and focus more on the exact same customers.
Brian, you see, he went short of words. He sort of lost his concentration there.
No, all right. Now, so let's go back to this. So you're sitting at one of your primary customers in Colorado, and you notice that there's a difference in the way they're going to apply this product. How did it inform you to make changes? What did it lead you to think?
Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to say it with the perspective that would help the most people listening. I think it gave us the impression as to our customer base, their core needs for features were so different. If you're inside a strip club, you can't use a cell phone. Number one problem. So, right then and there, we had to have a way of, allowing people to order. And then how do you make those people become aware? I think a huge problem, probably the number one issue in small business, small merchant, whether it's mobile ordering systems or in-store experiences, is how do you make the customer become aware, and then how do you actually get them to make that commitment to do something?
What do you think is the awareness trigger today versus back then? What did this inform you from all of these experiences?
Yeah, I don't think there's any magic to it. I think you can have simple signage. You can, we've done studies and seen that even with door signs and T-shirts hanging, we would have an illuminated sign. If you could have those, that makes a big difference, because what you do right there, Brian, is you attract the early adopters. You attract the people who are interested and want to try something, like myself, right? If I saw something cool and new in a bar, I'd whip out my phone, I'd give it a shot, and if I liked it, I'd tell other people. And that's what you got to get. You got to get the early adopters. You're never gonna get the guy who's sitting there and he doesn't care about his phone and he doesn't want to do any of that. But he'll listen to his friend as a filter who had previously tried something that had a good experience with it. So we really focused on getting those early adopters.
Now, Flowtab has met with some great success, but obviously it no longer exists. And you went about doing this most heroic thing, is that you turned over most of your work product out to the market as a whole, and I've read a lot of it, printed it out, in fact, use it as a resource material. Where was that point where you said, can't do this? I mean, you have 2,000 salespeople, you have some great uptake. Where was that inflection point that changed your mind?
Yeah, great question. It was, let me think, it really was realizing that we couldn't get our key metric, which I think is important to keep one key metric, which was orders per venue per day, to increase steadily. We would get spikes when we would do events, but we really couldn't nail that down. And I think the real pivotal moment was when we realized we held an event in San Francisco at McTeague's, which is our flagship venue. And we realized from a friend of mine said that people don't want to come in to a bar for speed and efficiency. They want the inefficiency. That's why people come to a bar. They want to bump up against other people, right? People are in a bar. Number one reason people go to bars is to meet other people of the opposite sex, right? I mean, this is the reality of it. So inefficiencies and sort of, waiting in line and striking up conversations with people. This is what people want oftentimes. So the bars that we were in, we offered something that people really didn't want. And I think that once we realized that, it became a flag to us, a red flag that we need to change. And, when we considered other verticals, we looked at the technology stack that we had built and we said, where would this be valuable? And just to quickly say how we did this was we created a list of 5 different verticals: hotels, golf courses, stadiums, and then local restaurants. And we said, which of these could we have a system to where people can order through the inventory interface that we built and place the order? It shows up on the iPad, it gets fulfilled and delivered. And we realized stadiums was the most interesting approach. So we called every stadium, Brian, you'd like this, we called every single one in the United States over 20,000 capacity, which there's well over 120 of them. And we talked to each of them. And we met with every single one in California. We met with 8 of them, and 3 of them agreed to say yes. They agreed to actually use the service. They thought it was neat. But at the exact same time, and here's the interesting part, Bypass Lane out of Texas raised, I think it was $4 million from AEG, the management company of all the stadiums, Nolan Ryan, and eBay. So, at that point we had, in the tens of thousands, less than, a month of runway, and kind of felt like this wasn't worth fighting over at that point.
Sort of the last straw that hit you.
That really was, yeah. That if you're going to have a last straw, that was it. It was the TechCrunch article that says Bypass Lane raised $4 million.
Yeah. So now, knowing what you know today, would you have even started the business? Would you have informed it differently? If you had a longer runway, more capitalization, would it have changed things? Yeah,
it's an interesting question because I think given capitalization, people become lazy, right?
Yeah.
We work with Mike Jones now, and he'll fund companies and say that the biggest thing is that if you waste time, then that's all you really have, So, to have capital is almost a gift and a curse sometimes because you end up working on projects that you don't really believe in for longer than you should. You can do so much in a year, but you can waste a year so easily. And I think that was the biggest lesson is, it was a beautiful thing not having tons of capital, right? Because then we were forced to figure it out or change.
Very disciplining. Very, very disciplining.
It really is. I think there's so many examples that you see.
So in your heart of hearts, do you think that the seed of this could have been replanted and could have taken hold, and here you are today, maybe in a different vertical? Let's just say you didn't pick stadiums, you picked golf courses.
Yeah. So I will make this the last question, Brian. I think this question is tough, right? Imagining what could have been is very difficult. I think, golf courses certainly had the challenges in place, but also the opportunities, right? Connectivity, fulfillment, halfway houses through the golf course. These are some of the challenges, but also, there's a lot of incentives, right? And I think if you could prove to a manager of a golf course, there's 30,000 golf courses in the country, and if you could prove to them that the revenue that you bring them is greater than the cost that you charge them, and the sign-up process is not too high and the experience is better, like you have a business. And there's a couple companies trying this now. And actually, after we posted the TechCrunch article and on the website documented the whole Flowtab story, we were actually approached by people working on the golf course concept. So, I'd love to see it become a reality. I'm a huge advocate and believer in mobile ordering and mobile payments in general. But I'm not sure that if we would have been able to do it or not. It's really hard to say. I think, one of the wisest words I've ever heard is Paul Graham predicting the success of Stripe and Dropbox and Airbnb, and said they are unpredictable. They are literally unpredictable. Yeah. So, I would have loved to believe that we were the best people in the world to make it happen, but you never know, Dex
so
one
here
was
you
random.
are. You decided to shut it down. What's your final feedback? What would you want to tell somebody who is just starting on their journey?
Here's the biggest thing.
This.
Use every experience as a level to the next thing, right? You want to work on something. You want to leverage that experience you gained and do something bigger and better with it. So what Kyle and I, who now work together on Home Hero, which is a marketplace for families to find caregivers, is, we were able to take that experience we had with Flowtab and transition it into something bigger. And now we're working with Mike Jones again down in Santa Monica at Science. And if you can leverage your experience, so, the point of the publicity of Flowtab at the end there was to, show everyone what we did so that they can hopefully gain something from it. But it was also to, to market ourselves, to say, this is what we did. This is why we're valuable. This is why we're experienced. And then, when you have that sort of XY axis of X being skills, Y being exposure, if you increase that area in that graph, that's your luck, right? And I think we were able to be really lucky after Flowtab and transition it quickly into the next big thing by just maximizing the amount of people that know about your experience. So I'd say to anyone listening that is at that point where they're considering their next work, their next project, maximize what you did in some way. Write about it, blog about it, get it out into the world so that people can see and say, wow, this guy learned so much. He's the expert at, whatever it may be. So I think not enough people do that. And actually that was a lot of response we got from that TechCrunch article is, wow, I really need to do this for my company. And it's so valuable to people, man.
Great wisdom there, Mike. I really want to thank you for this. I think the insights here really.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. This has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. You have a great day there, and next show.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Look forward.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.